Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Just Another Kill Team podcast, connecting kill team communities across the globe. If you're passionate about the tactical skirmish game that brings together strategy, lore, and creativity, you are in the right place. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and stay updated with our latest episodes. If you want to support the show, check out our Patreon. Your support means a lot to us. Follow us by using the social media links in the podcast description for all the latest news, and be sure to leave a review to let us know what you think. Thanks for tuning in. Here's today's episode.
I mean, you know, it's the first week, second week of Sanctifier Meltdown here in Kill Team headquarters worldwide, here at Just Another Kill Team podcast. We've got Milton on here with, we're talking about Blades of Khaine and maybe building a game plan and struggling against the current menace.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. It's really cool to get on here and talk with y'all. Although, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of great thoughts on Sanctifiers yet because we've only got one guy locally that has them built, so I just haven't run into him yet.
We can do some theory crafting and stuff too while we're at it. And also, for all of the listeners here that like to be involved, if you hear stuff that you want to comment on, hop in and let us know the secret weapons that you've been finding. Have you been playing against Sanctifiers and crushing them, or are you getting absolutely stomped? You can let us know in the Discord, let us know in the comments, let us know with direct messages. Do whatever you want. We're all here for a good time.
Yeah, because I think one of the interesting things about the game right now is now we have a very clearly defined good team, even though I think Warp Coven are probably still a little better. Would be my actual guess, and Felgor are probably more of a generic issue since there's more Felgor players floating around. Like, as much as Imperial Weirdos number 2 is probably very powerful, I don't know how many people locally care about playing Imperial Weirdos number 2.
Well, and I think they also are, like, not only are they just a good team, but they seem like they've got a couple teams that they would really struggle into. So I think they're really meta warping as well if a lot of people start to bring them out to tournaments. Yeah,
are you worried about them as a Blades of Khaine main at the moment? Because, you know, Blades of Khaine, they've got tools for everything, but do they have tools to deal with 10 dudes with chainswords?
It's tough, honestly. So I both am and am not worried. I am worried in that they have a lot of tools that are really good into Blades of Khaine. However, I want a ticket to Worlds, so I can day drink through tournaments now, and I don't have to be as personally involved in trying to win as hard. No, but seriously, it's tough. Just a lot of people with chain swords, and the sermon makes damage break points weird enough that you really got to have a good plan going in, because you can't just, you know, YOLO guys out there, because you'll just get out traded all day.
Yep, plus that last activation thing is really, really strong against Blades of Khaine, because Blades of Khaine are they're pretty killy, but they're fast, but they're not as fast as Sanctifiers, and the strike last is kind of a nightmare. I feel like maybe guarding on Into the Dark helps, because if they do just hide behind a door and then pop the door if they win initiative and then multi-charge you, it's not the end of the world because they can't multi-charge and fight you. Gallowdark, I feel like, is probably one of the things that probably helps pretty significantly. But Volkus, probably just using the 3D-ness of the terrain, and like they can't climb as well as Banshees can fly. So my first impression is use vantages and things like that to stage to places that they can't get you, even with all their crazy shenanigans, and then pounce down on the VIP targets and then just pick them apart bit by bit from the most important operatives, which I don't know what those are yet. I mean, the Confessor is obviously one of them, but the Confessor is also one of the tougher ones to hit, because you might just jump on him and he says no, and then you're just hanging out with your pants down.
Theoretically, my plan, and I might run into him this weekend, so we'll see how it goes, but my plan is to not try to kill the Confessor, or at least certainly not to do it in melee, because that's a nightmare, and to just try and kill everything else around him, and see how that goes, you know?
Yeah, it is not that many dudes. I mean, it's because...
And there's still 7 wound guys.
It's 10 of them. And 7 wounds, it would not be a big deal if they didn't have the damage reduction. So if you can, catch someone out, I mean, don't plan on that, because that's just a mistake. But it's if you are staging early game near objectives, you are playing the Sanctifier's game. Whereas if you're hanging back a little bit, you force them to go swallow the objectives, and then once they're like sitting on the objectives, you could just run out and hit them hard and hit them first.
Yeah.
It really like the
Well-
most dangerous part of the turn is that last activation. Last
Absolutely.
couple.
And what you're describing there as far as, sitting back and letting them take objectives is generally how I play Blades of Khaine. So
Against everyone?
for the most part, like,
Yeah.
people talk a lot about staging threats when, we talk about Kill Team Online, and that's not actually how I tend to think about it for the most part. A lot of people are like, okay, into the turning point, I'm going to put, these one or two models up here where they're ready to threaten things. But because Blades of Khaine are APL3, are fairly fast, and have acrobatic banshees, the way that I tend to think about it is more about controlling space than presenting threats. So I'm staging my models to attack the objectives instead of my opponent's models. And my goal on turning point 1 is generally to get as far up the board as I can, as safely as I can. So I'm more concerned with being safe than with being ready to charge something, because, I'm honestly not going to charge all that many things. I'm going to shoot at them until they walk into range where I then have to charge them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But it's also one of those things that's a little bit awkward to talk about, because it's going to be different on every table, based on terrain and where you can hide safely. So it's hard to describe to a newer player that you're talking to on like the Command Point Discord, like, oh, how do I play Blades of Khaine? How do you stage your models? Well, God, that's a big topic, right? Like, I'd have to have a table there to show you how I'd approach it in each individual game. So
Yeah. I'm curious if you have any like big sweeping concepts like always skew or don't ever skew. Because I mean, like, Blades of Khaine is a very list buildy. They're very capable of like changing all the time. Like, you can skew, you can blend, you can do whatever. Do you have like a base place that you start? Are there things that are off limits?
I mean, so I've never really run all Dire Avengers. That's the closest thing to off limits for me, I guess. But I usually play a mixed team in almost every matchup. Part of that is just because I think it's good. Part of it's also comfort value. When the team came out, I knew I was going to play them regardless of how good they were, because I play Eldar. You can probably see behind me a bunch of my models in the case. So super all in on Aspect Warriors. They're my favorite thing in 40K. But when the team came out, our local group had just started doing a really long narrative campaign. And one of our guys, Will, had put it together, and he was basically shoving a bunch of the Necromunda rules for campaigns into the Kill Team rules for the individual games. So it wasn't super balanced all the time. It wasn't a competitive sort of thing. But I basically spent 9 months doing this campaign playing Blades of Khaine every week. So I was kind of locked into a mixed roster, and so I'm just super comfortable playing that into pretty much whatever's across the table from me. You got a lot of tools. You can usually figure something out to do. So when in doubt, I play a mixed team, usually with Striking Scorpion Exarch, 2 Dire Avengers, 3 Banshees, and 2 Striking Scorpions.
It sounds like you're doing a lot of hit and run tactics. So you mentioned that you're going out to shoot and then running away. So this is kind of abusing Banshee's ability to fly in and out of awkward positions on Volcus to make asymmetric shooting threats, I assume?
Definitely. And so one of the things that a lot of people assume when they look at the rules for Blades of Khaine is they're like, okay, it's a melee team. And, they've got all right melee. It's actually a short-range shooting team that's really good at finishing models in melee. That's what I've been telling people for months. And a lot of other people are starting to like come around to that and realize that having ceaseless rending bolt pistols on everyone is really good.
Yeah.
Like, really good.
It's really good. It's like you double shoot and you're like killing Space Marines way more than anyone is like willing to admit or like can calculate.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I've run the math on it. Like if you just plug it into the I forget what the name of the thing is, but it's like the damage calculator.
Yeah.
Yes. If you just plug in ceaseless rending 3/4 into Marines, it's wild how much damage it does. And if you take enough shots, you will spike damage with rending, and then you'll have those turns where you're randomly like, well, I guess I get 4 crits on you and just kill a Space Marine, and you can't do anything about it.
Yeah, especially
good.
against like 12 wound Phobos Marines like Jason's been running around.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure. I think that like the Phobos matchup is interesting. I was playing a month and a half ago, I guess. There was a GT in Montreal, and I played against Phobos in rounds 5 and 6, both against quite good players. It's a really interesting matchup because you're both fairly low model count. You're both really good at killing each other. But I think it's one that I think slightly favors Blades of Khaine. Feel free to disagree with me, but I feel comfortable into that matchup.
Did you win both of those? Is that the one where you got the golden ticket? And you won both of those?
I did, and one of them was in the round 5 was against Max Hannibal from, I think he's Toronto. He's with Chimera Wargaming, plays Phobos very well, and it was a 1-point game that came down to the last activation. But on the final turn of the game, I had a Dire Avenger that was able to like peek around a corner and do a torrent shot on 2 of his operatives and killed both of them. Just dealt a ton of damage, spiked those rending rolls, and at the table I was thinking about it, it's like, well, that sure is lucky. Like, good for me, got him. But then I was thinking about it afterwards and kind of did the math on it. It's like, no, like on average, they deal a whole lot of damage, even to Marines, and it was totally reasonable that he was able to finish both of those wounded Phobos off there. The shooting is actually really strong, but it's a little bit weird in that you only get the ceaseless against expended operatives. So, in a lot of games, you want to, the way that people generally think about trading is like, okay, I'll go and I'll try to kill their pieces that haven't activated yet. That way it puts them down activations, which if you can, awesome. But with Blades of Khaine, you kind of want to be shooting the guys that have already gone. So it just ends up, you have to sequence your turns a little bit differently and kind of approach the way that you trade threats in the midboard differently.
Do you have any tricks that you've been using to get those shooting avenues up that keep your operatives around a little bit longer? Dire Avengers have infinite range, but you've mentioned that you use both Striking Scorpions and Howling Banshees. Are there equipment tricks? Are there just positional things that you've spotted that people tend to walk into? Or is it just that objectives tend to be close to, terrain, so you can take a dash move, get within 2, shoot someone, and then disappear after someone has been like, well, you haven't done anything for 3 turns. I'm going to go move up and score a point in the middle of turn 2. And you're like, all right, well, now I'm going to spend 2 guys to safely attack this one dude on the objective and just hide. So it's basically, against Marines, you're using the unactivation to really just ding the people and like basically lose turn 2 so that you can win turn 3 and turn 4.
It's basically that. I think that because Blades of Khaine are so mobile, I very rarely end up taking deployable equipment, like the barricades, heavy barricades, even ladders, unless it's on Into the Dark or Beta Decima, because that's just sort of a different monster. But especially on Vulcus, there's enough terrain on the table that I feel pretty safe playing around it. So my equipment is usually the faction equipment or grenades if there's a particular reason to take them. And then it's really just using that APL-3 and trying to take as many safe shots as possible. Getting out, shooting, getting back behind, out of line of sight. Because there's a lot of terrain on Vulcus that breaks line of sight really effectively. There's usually some really good places to hide. So, yeah, that's just kind of how I approach it. And I just take as many shots as possible, even if they're not great ones. And because eventually you'll spike damage. It'll happen.
Yeah, and like
no
a
one's
not
safe
great
from the
safe
shuriken.
shot. Exactly. Like a not great safe shot is like, I mean, you've got plenty of people. A lot of the times you are kind of just like hanging out, waiting for people to be expended. So you might as well just kind of like throw a couple of chip damage shots out there and see if something happens if you're not like risking anything for it. That's like super duper strong. Someone doing that well is my biggest nightmare. And I've like run into some really good Eldari players like Corsairs, and like I still haven't done the Phobos versus Blades of Khaine matchup, but like I noodled around with Blades of Khaine for a while. Like I was especially like I didn't have all the models built and painted up, but I had Banshees because Banshees are cool, and I just had them because they're cool. And like a while ago we were chatting a little bit online, and I was like going nuts trying to yell to the whole world, be like, "Wow, Banshees sure are cool!" And you were like one of the only people that were like, "Yeah, Banshees are cool." In those days, which was pretty exciting.
early in this edition, I felt like I was going crazy because I've been playing Blades of Khaine a lot since last edition. Like a lot. Too much. I've got a bunch of other teams. I hardly play them because I have more fun playing Blades of Khaine, just because there's a really deep toolbox, and you can, like, having APL3, I feel like you have a lot of, how to phrase it, you have a lot of agency in the game. Like, you can make some big plays, you can do some really explosive things, so I feel like unless you've really screwed up, usually there's something you can do in a situation that's profitable or interesting. But so I'd been doing quite well with Blades of Khaine. At that point, I had won like 18 games in a row in tournaments, and some of that was at the end of last edition, some of that was into early this edition, and then all of the people out here doing tier lists and all the various content creators for Kill Team are like, man, Blades of Khaine, Blades of Lame, they're terrible. I'm just like, what's going on? Like, I think I'm pretty good at Kill Team. I don't think I'm a genius. I don't think I've got some sort of secret sauce that other people can't comprehend. I just am out here actually playing the team, and a lot of people that weren't playing them didn't put the pieces together as far as how strong the shooting was, or hadn't thought through all the ways that you can use like changes in team composition, because it gives you access to any of the tac ops, which is pretty unique to Blades of Khaine, and I think Inquisition can also take all of them. So
Yeah,
the more you think about it, and the more you really like put in the reps on the team, the more rewarding it is.
Yeah. I do think it is one of the teams that if you don't have a lot of reps, it's really, really easy to just train wreck them. I mean, like, because the way that I did it, have played Blades of Khaine, is a completely different angle. It's right on brand for what you'd expect from me, where it's just like 8 Banshees. It's a skew. You just go totally crazy. You try to get as many double kills as you can, and then sometimes you just lose on the dice, because if I wanted to be really good, I'd have to be more flexible than that, which is why it's so exciting to have someone like you with a more rational, balanced approach here.
Well, it's sometimes the right call is to go all Banshees and just get stuck in, right? And it's super fun.
What's the situation that you would do that? Is it like faction dependent the most, or is it like map dependent the most, or assumingly
I'd say it's mostly faction dependent. So, yeah, for anyone listening, like the big thing on Blades of Khaine are the aspect techniques, and if you pull them up on Warhammer Community, they're all listed there. Each aspect has 5 different techniques, and so each of your operatives is really flexible since you don't have any specialist operatives. The aspect techniques for striking scorpions generally are better against ranged operatives, because you can get things like super conceal, or kill something and then dash and go back into conceal, change your order. So that's really good in those matchups where you want to avoid somebody trading back for your models with ranged pieces, right? Banshees tend to have better melee tools. So, they're only 4 attacks, but they've got power swords, and power swords are pretty good. But the specific techniques you have, acrobatic lets you essentially fly, so it's really easy to get non-reciprocal threat ranges against other melee pieces. Another one of the techniques, you can parry before the attacker swings, so that can make people trying to trade into you with melee pieces really swingy, especially when you combine it with the Runa Shielding, which basically gives you just a scratch once per game. So Banshees I really like into matches where you're going to have to scrap in the middle of the table over objectives with a melee team. So like into Felgor, I'm playing all Banshees.
Love that.
Goremongers, I was actually just having a conversation about this on the Command Point Discord like 2 hours ago. I think my initial thought was all Banshees, and I think that's probably fine.
Probably the half damage is what's really crimping their style.
So
the 10 wounds with half damage means that a Banshee is pretty much never actually going to kill a single Goremonger. Even in like the most average of your average situations, you're just not gonna kill him.
Yeah, so okay, I haven't played that matchup yet because I was playing, and I've played against Goremongers, but I was using my Plague Marines just because I painted them up recently and I really liked how they looked. So I was going to like a small local tournament.
Basically elves, Goremongers, you squint a little, they're just people, they're just humans with elf legs.
But I think that, all Banshees I think is a viable setup. but is probably better on Volcus or on Beta Decima if your local group plays Beta Decima.
I think the
I know
Northeast might be
that's
the only region that still plays Beta Decima, so you might be on hollowed ground at that point, Milton.
So I mean, we only really play it here in Vermont because everyone out in Maine seems to love it. So we go out to their tournaments and they run the stuff in Boston. So it's like, well, I guess we better learn how to do this, right?
Like I said, it's basically almost just the northeast part of America. And Australia was playing it for a little bit. So Beta Decima has kind of gone away, at least at most competitive tables. But, you know, you play your local meta more than you play the global meta.
Yeah. But I think on Into the Dark, I would play a mixed team into Goremongers. I think that's definitely strongest on Into the Dark because you can do weird things on hatchway fights with Striking Scorpions, and being able to have Dire Avengers get access to the Torrent shot with lethal 5-up, you can potentially like chunk 2 guys down 8 wounds, which is really strong.
Yeah, that'd be very,
so that's where I'd
strong.
want to be there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a part of me that was thinking against Goremongers, like Striking Scorpions to get through the half damage thing, but if they're at full health, it doesn't really matter. But like if you've chipped them at all, like the Manda Blasters are going to make that fight so much easier.
Yeah, for sure. I was just doing the math on that earlier today as I was talking to folks about it. It's a really interesting one. I think that Goremongers, I think the matchup really is going to come down to, are you able to set up situations where you can get a bunch of shooting off on them, honestly? Because if you're just trying to go and fight them on objectives, that damage reduction is so strong because it's on every fight sequence.
Mm-hmm.
So even being able to like double fight, man, just the math is not great for killing them with Howling Banshees or with Striking Scorpions unless you've chunked them a bit first. Now, if you're able to start softening them up, you're putting them in a situation where they might have to start using their gore tanks to heal, and then they're not able to use those gore tanks for all of the various other things they want to be doing.
Including rerolls. Yeah. That's huge.
I mean, the rerolls are going up to 5 dice, or getting the extra APL or the free fight with their aspirants. Like, I feel like you really don't want to be in a situation where everyone's clustered up fighting in melee in a giant ball, and then aspirants can just like ping pong around double killing things. Because they absolutely will, and that's like the worst case scenario, right?
Yeah, it really does feel like a matchup where both teams absolutely have the tools to kill each other, and it really just 100%, it comes way more to the player skill than it does just like the factions rock, paper, scissoring each other. And I think I think that's cool, and I think that's where the whole game should be at, obviously.
Yeah, I think it makes for a really interesting game. And, one of the reasons that I like Blades of Khaine so much is, like I said earlier, you have a lot of agency in the game. It's a team where you can really express player skill and do weird things with positioning that a lot of other teams can't do. And so you can usually find a way out of a problem or come up with a creative solution. That's my favorite part. That's what it's all about for me. And that's why I love the team so much. So anything like Goremongers or Sanctifiers, where the game is a lot of it's about positioning, and they've got some weird threat ranges that you really have to account for, I think it's certainly interesting. We'll see.
You have a good example in tournament play where you found a novel tool for a situation. I think, for people who don't know, Blades of Khaine have the ability to like switch 2 models during strategic play phase, which is very fun and very flavorful, but also very hard to actually use. And I feel like there are a lot of tools on Blades of Khaine that end up kind of feeling, you're only going to be able to use them so often. We talked to Void Dancer players enough. They mentioned you always get a domino field because people are always shooting. You don't always get a juxtaposition that's useful. Sometimes all of your models already staged up, so you're like, there's no reason to switch people back and forth. But, is there a tool that you remember off the top of your head that really gave you an opening that other players who are interested in Blades of Khaine could see as, oh, maybe this would be fun for me to do?
Yeah, I think the flashiest one is definitely Dance of Death, like you mentioned, being able to swap models, positions in the strategic phase. And there's 2 main ways that I've used it. At first, when they did the changeover to the new edition, that was an absolutely new ploy, so no one had used it at that point, right? And my first dozen games, I didn't use it either. I was like, this is weird. It's awkward to set up. don't have time for that. But I went up to a 3-round tournament in Montreal with a friend a while back, and I sort of set it as a goal for myself. Like, my goal is to use Dance of Death in each of these 3 games. Like, I'm going to try to set up situations where I can use it, and it's a 3-round event. Obviously, I want to win, but like I really want to figure this out, right? And then see if I can kind of unlock some things for myself. And yeah, it was really fun. I used it a couple times profitably, and then one time was kind of like a womp womp womp. Wish I hadn't done that moment. But the 2 main ways that I found that Dance of Death is really useful is that you can switch models' positions, so you can do things like put a Dire Avenger or a Dire Avenger Exarch in like turning point 1 up onto a vantage point and just start blasting. See if you can get lucky, crank out some rending shots on somebody, because he's already the Exarch always has ceaseless, so he's always reliable. It doesn't have to be on an expended operative. And the risk to doing that is then if your opponent wins initiative the following turn, they just kill your leader because he's standing out in the open. But if you can switch his position with a striking Scorpion that has one with a Gloom, has Super Conceal, you can reel him back into safety if you don't get to go first. So you can set up these sort of asymmetrical situations where you're like, okay, I'm going to go up, I'm going to shoot. If I hang some damage, great, but it's really low risk. And then if you win initiative, you just keep him there, you shoot again, and then just walk back behind terrain. You can get a bunch of unanswered shots doing that. The other way that I've used it is using striking Scorpions, again with one with a Gloom, staged up ahead of the rest of my models. So you stage them up safely where they can't really be shot at, but then if you win initiative, you can swap its place with a Howling Banshee and then use an Acrobat charge up onto vantage points to get people's gunners or snipers. I did that against an Angel of Death sniper. And he saw it coming and avoided it for 1 turn, but wasn't able to avoid it the second time. Like, he saw it coming because I specifically told him it was coming, and like ham-fistedly measured out ranges. Like, I can do this. It was against one of the guys at my local store, so wasn't trying to get him with anything too tricky. But yeah, like if you are really careful about where your models are safe and can use Dance of Death to then stage Howling Banshees, you can do some really weird things that even people that know what your rules do will not see coming, and will be really hard for them to defend against.
That's a very cool play. I like that a lot.
And I like the idea that you went into a tournament, or even just, this is something that's like applicable for anyone who is just playing with friends and trying to get better, is looking at a tool and telling yourself you're going to use this tool every game just to get a sense for it, so that you, even if you don't think it'll be good, like find it in your plan to just do Dance of Death every day, every game, until you get a sense for like, okay, it's not going to be useful here, it's going to be good here. Because if you don't have the desire to look at a weird tool and try to frame out a way to use it, you're never going to find those opportunities ever, because it's just going to be a tool that doesn't exist to you.
Well, and I joke around
conceal orders from Jason.
I joke around a bit about like the type of people that like to play Eldar. I play Eldar in 40k, and there's definitely a type of person that likes to play Eldar where they like want to be cleverer than their opponent. It's me. So the idea of like, I've got this really weird tool that no other team has anything quite like it, and then I'm just not going to use it. No, like I've got to figure this out, right?
Anathema.
Yeah, I absolutely cannot have that be how I play the team. And also, at that point, kind of to go back to our earlier conversation about when Jason and I had talked about Blades of Khaine on Discord, I had reached out to Jason because he was one of the only other people that was not ridiculously negative about the team. And like I said earlier, I felt like I was going crazy because I was seeing a lot of success with them, and other people found them really hard to play into. But the rest of the world was like, well, this is garbage. So I felt strongly enough about it that I started a YouTube channel, and I've been putting up a bunch of videos talking about how to play Blades of Khaine, and going like into way more depth than I think anyone else online is doing about any particular team on Kill Team. There's several hours of me talking about Blades of Khaine on YouTube, and I feel strongly about like not having secret tech. I'm just trying to tell everyone literally everything. I go to tournaments and I have all of my rules printed out for people. I give people takebacks. I tell them exactly what I can do. I tell them if they're about to walk into a really stupid trap. I'm not trying to gotcha people, but I am trying to create a really complicated board state where I've got a lot of tools and other people don't, and I can, figure out solutions that they can't, right?
So no interest in the inquisitorial agents then. When the set release, you'd ride or die Eldari,
Kind of, yeah. I mean, the team kind of clicked with me, right? And
yeah.
I think that's one of the big things in Kill Team is finding a team that works for you. The play style that I, not to say it's the only play style of Blades of Khaine, but the play style that I use, it really works for me. So I just have the most fun doing it. And Inquisition was really powerful. It still is quite powerful, I think, but they just didn't get me excited. Which is a shame, because I was one of those people that loved the old Inquisitor game, like the huge models. So when I was in like middle school, the town near me had a Games Workshop store, and they were doing like a raffle one day. And my best friend and his family went, and my little sister was with them because she was best friends with his sister, and my little sister won a copy of the Inquisitor rulebook. So she came home and gave it to me, because what was she going to do with it, right? I read through that thing so many times. I was obsessed with it. It's still one of my favorite Games Workshop things that's ever happened. The lore was amazing. The look into the universe was super cool. The mechanics were great. And then to have an inquisitorial agents team that I wasn't excited about was just like, damn.
It's all right. There's sanctifiers. Mine is an inquisitorial agent sanctifier group, because I just replaced the confessor with a inquisitor because it seems fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
As far as the Blades of Khaine playstyle goes, it sounds like you play a little bit more reactively than some other people would frame a game of Kill Team as. When did you switch styles to playing a more reactive style, waiting for your opponents to expend operatives and then using the ceaseless on your guns? Because, a lot of people are very into 40k for the melee focus, but you've done a little bit more of shooting. You kind of sounds like you're playing the Blades of Khaine the way that shooting hordes would generally play. It's just you only have 8 models, so the number one goal for you is to get out of dodge. When did the switch flip, and what matchup was it that kind of like solidified it for you?
So I think part of it was what I was playing before Blades of Khaine came out. The team that I was playing most right before they came out was Phobos. So I had a lot of practice in trying to play that.
Predictable.
Yeah, right. So when you've got a lot of practice at playing that sort of cagey shooting play style with a couple operatives like Reavers that maybe aren't great at killing something from full health but are really good at finishing something off. So because I had a lot of experience with that and started playing Blades of Khaine, I started playing in that style pretty quickly, and it worked well for me. And before that I was playing Void Dancers, a lot of elf nonsense,
All right, so it was pretty natural transition.
Absolutely. Well, I haven't been playing. I've been playing against Goremongers. I haven't been playing them, although I am working on some conversions. We'll see how that goes. But I've been trying to force myself to play some other things to,
broaden the fresh, right? A little bit.
Yeah. And trying to use them as excuses to actually finish some painting projects instead of painting 1 or 2 models from a team and then having them sit on a shelf and collect dust.
Yeah. As far as like the tactics go, I think we have a pretty good zoom in on you using the focus on shooting so that you can chip people down before, going in for the melee kill, so that you force your opponent to interact with dangerous melee pieces before they interact with you. From a strategic level decision, are you doing just, plant signal beacons, confirm kill like everyone else is? Is there some other attack op plan that you've been doing? Is there, a version of the game where you try to do take ground every once in a while?
So take ground is one of the ones that I very rarely play. But again, because you can change your team around and have access to any of the attack ops, yeah, you can do some interesting things. So I play a lot of plant beacons. Obviously, like it's good. You're running a lot of banshees. There you go. I like overrun quite a bit. I think Blades of Khaine are one of the best teams in the game at scoring overrun because we're APL3. We're fast. We have decent melee pieces, and some of the Howling Banshee and Striking Scorpion techniques can let you kind of get safe after you kill something in melee. So it's a little bit better than other teams that have to kill something, then stand in the open and hope no one finishes them off during that turn. I also really like Contain into certain matchups or on certain boards, especially like the Games Workshop Into the Dark boards, which I, for the record, hate. I think they're terrible. But that's a separate discussion. But one of the reasons I dislike them is that several of the layouts, there's no safe place to be on the opposing side of the board, which makes it really difficult to do things like plant beacons where you just like you're standing in the open, you're going to get killed. So being able to swap into 3 Dire Avengers and then playing Contain, I think is actually quite good.
1 Dire Avenger to babysit everyone in each lane.
Yeah, and then, I mean, Dire Avengers on Into the Dark are quite good because, you know, you can get Torrent, so you get lethal 5-up on way more shots than people are expecting. The Exarch can always double shoot, and then you have a Warrior who can spend to double shoot. You can put out a surprising amount of damage, and, you know, you can set up situations where people are like, okay, like I've got to kind of extend in order to get through these closed doors, right? So they've got that APL tax to get onto your side of the board anyways, and then once they do, they just get blown up.
That's a pretty nice, good strategic level thing. Because I think, you know, for people learning how to play the game right now, I suspect most of the internet conversation is around plant beacons being the easiest thing to do on Blades of Khaine. So hearing that you switch into security from time to time is good. And then overrun being another choice is also probably not as obvious. I think a lot of people do Storm Hostile and overrun, I guess. But obviously 3 APL operatives are going to have a much easier time with overrun.
Yeah, especially with all the cool tech you mentioned. I kind of wanted to like shout out a couple of those things for anyone that's never like thought about this or isn't familiar. Like I think the easiest one to call out is the Striking Scorpions Strike and Fade. If you just push into enemy territory, like even if you like use Dance of Death because you've got, I mean the forward line probably is Scorpions, but if it isn't, you can flip to get them over there, charge into enemy territory to kill an isolated target, and then use Strike and Fade, which is an aspect technique, to flip back to Conceal, which is a really good combo for overrun. And you had mentioned that Banshees can do that as well. I'd like to hear a little bit about that.
If you hit something with a crit, you can use Rain of Tears to then immediately fall back or dash 3 inches. So you can, you know, like maybe you resolve a normal hit first and then finish something with a crit so that you can then dash like back behind a wall in a stronghold where nothing can see you to shoot you. That can be really useful. If you're doing this in the middle of a turning point against a shooting team, you can also use, what's it called? There's a technique for Howling Banshees where if you charge, fight.
Continue charging.
Yes, you can kill something, then do the rest of your charge movement. So you can use that to like kill something and then charge into a expended ranged operative that isn't going to kill you and just sort of hide in melee against people. So yeah, there's a couple ways to do it with all of our operatives, and it's hard to. It's probably better against some of the more like mid-range teams than against elites who can counteract and potentially kill you, or like the really horde teams who have like a couple plasmas or meltas that can go last. But yeah, against some of the other mid-range teams with a similar model count, overrun can actually be really difficult to deny in a way that some of the other TAC ops aren't. But I'm also honestly kind of bad at playing plant beacons. So I have explored some of the other options just because I often find myself in situations where I've tried to get really clever with positioning to like get a kill for free and you know not trade any models, and then I'm like, oh, like damn, I've put myself in a position where I can't plant a beacon because I just I'm boxed in.
Yeah, it's because the playstyle that you're proselytizing in this position is actually staying a little bit further back and chipping away at your opponent's activation count, which is something that generally horde shooting team players tend to do because you really can't go toe-to-toe with people in melee. You know, luckily Blades of Khaine can. But because you're positioning for those asymmetric threats, you're not able to make it to the halfway point and then over while also staying safe, right? If you're going to run that Marine over, then generally it's going to get shot at. And, for Blades of Khaine, it's generally the Howling Banshee flips over to your opponent's side of the board, kills a dude, and then you're like, well, she's going to die anyway, so I'm going to plant this beacon. And the goal for those Blades of Khaine players is to do that 3 times, but that's 3 sacrifice pieces. Whereas your play style is trying to keep as many pieces safe as possible to really get that 3 APL advantage on turns like middle 3, end of 4.
Well, and it's not only is it, you're sending a model across the center line, like you kill something in melee and then you go to plant your beacon, like sure, that's good and you're scoring your points, which is how you win the game. But you're also using APL to plant the beacon. So in some of the tougher matchups, one of the things that I've done, like when Legionaries were particularly strong before they got nerfed.
War Coven, War Coven, Legionary, good for similar reasons at the same time.
One of the things that I would frequently do in those matchups is I would not take plant beacons. I would take confirm kill. Because if we're going into a game where the other team has a bit of an edge in melee, and they're tough enough that they can walk up the board and maybe take a couple shots, and we're playing on Vulcus, which has a lot of heavy terrain, which can make it tough to shoot at them sometimes. And they often have access to security or like really good ways to score tac ops. The way that I tend to look at those tough matchups is, well, I need to kill them. Like I'm going to have to take some of them off the table. I think that implant is a great way to lose every game. So if my game plan is that I've got to kill some guys, I'm going to try to take the tac ops that give me benefits for killing people, right? And I'm going to try to use all of my APL to kill more people faster. So in those situations, I may have a Banshee that goes and charges across the board and then, uses Rain of Tears to chunk somebody. But instead of then planting a beacon, I'm going to shoot them too. Or at that point, I was taking crack grenades a lot. And I'm going to throw a ceaseless crack grenade at somebody and try to, I try to play very cagey through turning point 1 and turning point 2 and maybe even the beginning of turning point 3. And I'm looking to try and get anything for free that I possibly can get, right? Like I want to win the battle for material. I want to take things off the table from their side, and I don't want to lose models. But oftentimes at a certain point, you've kind of got to go all in and start to use those melee pieces. And so once you're committed, I like the option to then use all of my APL to kill people as efficiently as I can.
Did you ever find issues when you were doing confirm kill on actually getting the full 6 points then? Because it sounds like you're doing it more against Space Marines. One of those issues is on turn 2, if you don't get that kill and the Space Marines are doing contain or take ground or whatever, you are losing on that tac op, track of the game, and you have to make up that difference. Did you find that an issue, or was it generally your opponents were in range to let you get kills effectively?
Yeah, honestly, I've not had any issues with it. And part of that might be, so I haven't had a opportunity to play in a ton of really big GTs. Being here in the Northeast, Kill Team is certainly growing. It's growing fast. But the first GTs for Kill Team up here were fairly recent. So, and I'm in Vermont, which is 4 hours from Boston, a little bit more from New York. Montreal's not that far from us, but they just had their very first GT a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. I can't keep track of time anymore. So, we're throwing our first GT here in Burlington this summer. We're hoping to start drawing some more people out here for some more competitive Kill Team. But yeah, until fairly recently, I just didn't have a great opportunity to play in anything bigger at a high level of competition. So since our group's been kind of hitting the road more, I've been able to get more of those games in, which has been fantastic. So there may have been some of those earlier games where I could have been punished for having that really risky game plan. Thankfully for me, I wasn't. It's worked out quite well. As Will, one of our local guys, will also say, I'm an enormous luck sack. So one of my biggest skills in Kill Team, other than, I'm pretty good at positioning, I'm also really good at rolling sixes with rending weapons. I'll tell you, if you can do that, killing Space Marines is pretty easy.
Yeah. And for anyone that hasn't ever done the math or just sat down and rolled it a few times, ceaseless rending is going to give you these rending critical hits a lot more than you think. So if you're like going to play against Blades of Cain for the first time, you're like, oh my gosh, you keep hitting me with 2 or 3 crits. It's like, yeah, that's the normal. Like you got to get used to it, bud.
Yeah, that's just how it is. Like that is not them being lucky. That's just the math.
Yeah, especially when you get Lethal 5 in the mix. Your Lethal 5 ceaseless rending is just like 3 crits all day.
Yeah. I was playing. There was a 3-round tournament a little while back. I was playing against Angels of Death, and with the way the board was set up, I took a Dire Avenger Exarch and I took Contain just to force him to come to where he isn't safe. And he hung a model out on turn 1. I was like, okay, well, cool. Like I can use Dance of Death to like reel my Exarch back if this doesn't work, but I'm going to go up and I'm going to double shoot. And I just like killed his leader. Turning point 1, he was in cover. Didn't matter. Because sometimes you just get 4 crits and then you get to shoot again.
That's why you gotta smoke. I mean, that's the power of smoke grenades in the current metagame.
Yeah,
Jason's been doing it with the aggressive Marines staged up for the melee kills, where you run up, put, up to 3 Marines in smoke. It is possible on 3 32s if you place them in a perfect triangle to have one 20mm marker with a 1-inch bubble protect 3 Marines. To do it, and it definitely has its value as far as getting your Marines into your opponent's lines, and it might actually work against this Blades of Cain style, except for the part where it sounds like you are cozy to the fact that you'll just Dire Avenger torrent your opponent if you think they're going to do it. So
I think Blades of Cain have pretty good matchups into Marines, other than a Warp Coven. But against everyone else, I'm totally comfortable in those matchups. I think they're pretty good for us because the Shuriken are really good at killing them. And even if you have to trade a model, like, okay, I'll walk 7 inches up and be within 2 of you and double shoot. Like, we might have to trade someone, but I'll take that trade every day. And then if you are able to... Blades of Cain are really good in the late game because you're so fast in your APL 3. So if you're able to trade at a fairly even pace, not like model for model, but against Marines, I guess that's fine. But like at a fairly even pace for whatever the size of their team is, you get into those late game situations, and then the Blades of Cain models, I think, tend to be better than just about anyone else's because they're fast, they can shoot, they're good in melee. Like they've got a whole lot going for them, and they've got various techniques that give them some additional mobility. So you can really get across the board and do things that other people just can't do. So yeah, like if you're able to play safe and get into the end game with more pieces than other people, you put them in situations where they don't really have a good answer to anything you're trying to do.
All right. Well, you've given a very strong sell on Blades of Cain being very good right now. However, the stats have not been particularly favorable to Blades of Cain as a broad faction. There have been some bright spots in their runtime for the edition. LVO had a big, long run, but they haven't been doing all that well. What kind of tips do you think those Blades of Cain players should be taking if you don't think that they're going to fully adopt your idea of kind of giving up turn 2 in some respects and playing for turns 3 and turns 4 and overwhelming your points scoring? Is your way of playing Blades of Cain dependent on taking in that points deficit to accrue a board advantage? Or are there other tips and tricks that you can give to people who just want to slowly pull in your advice until they fully take the red pill and move on to giving up points on turn 2?
Yeah, I mean, my way is not the only way, right? Like I've been pretty successful with it, but there's not that many people that are playing Blades of Cain competitively. That's just the truth. If you look at the stats, the number of games played swings wildly from week to week and is generally lower than a lot of other teams. So, there's definitely weeks where Blades of Cain, this maybe 2 or 3 months ago, I think there was a week where there were like a 64% win rate, and everyone was like, what is this? This is crazy. But the games played were like 18. So that was like 2 people had a really good weekend, and then that's the stats for the team, right? And I did a really short video about this on the YouTube channel, just talking about sort of stats and how silly they are for such a, and not silly as in not relevant. They're relevant and important, but how weird they can be with such a low representation. For quite a while, I was the number 2 like BCP ranked Blades of Kain player in the world. And that's because I won 4 local tournaments, and that's what that tracks. And so I did a video. I was just like, look, you can be the number 2 or 3 ranked Blades of Kain player in the world if you win a couple local tournaments. That's literally all it takes. Really, really low bar here because not many people are doing it. So, yeah, I would love to see people bring the team out and dismantle some of these other teams that are really popular. And I think that because the team is really flexible and because with list construction you have access to any of the TAC ops, if you're really careful about how you build your game plan, if you go into the game with a clearly defined game plan, you know your win conditions, you know your opponent's win condition and how to disrupt it, I think the team can play into just about any matchup. And, you know, if you're a giant luck sack and can roll some rending crits on your shuriken weapons, you can kill anything, right? It's not that hard. Just roll more 6s.
Landing, 4 dice on 3s, ceaseless 3/4 rending. It means that you only need 1 6 out of 5 dice or 6 dice, and that's not that crazy.
And so, I think that the biggest barrier to playing really well consistently in a competitive setting is not necessarily that you need to be playing safer or more cagey or like I play. It's knowing when to play cagey and when not to. Knowing when, like, the only way to win this game is to get out there and punch some people in the face. And when that happens, you've got to make the right decision and stop being cagey. So because you're a really mobile team and you're already APL 3, but you can get kind of like faux APL 4 through some of the aspect techniques and can do really explosive things, figuring out when to try and be explosive and try to take over a game is a huge deal. And so that's the big thing. It's a team that really rewards a lot of knowledge of how the game, a lot of like foresight of how the game's going to go, right? And if you can
sound like a warlock spreading the good word about the Creed.
Space Elf magic. I'm all about it.
Don't worry. Luckily, no one in Kill Team has to worry about prophecy dice. Not yet, anyways.
Well, they took that away in 40K for the most part, so they're safe now too.
Now
only play much 40K anymore, but yeah. They're disgusting. And not Warp Coven in general, just that Fate is my weapon. Is that the ploy,
Fate
right?
itself is my weapon, yes.
Yeah. Oh, it's so frustrating.
Yes, the only team in the current game that still has access to 2 Justice Scratches pretty much every turn.
Yeah. Well, and kind of talking a bit about my general play style, earlier in the edition when Warp Coven is one of the really big problems in the game, I kept thinking about it as like, honestly, if you charge them with a Howling Banshee, it's terrible because you probably get 1 crit and then they make you not have a crit anymore, and then they just punch you to death with Space Marine fists. Terrible, embarrassing. Yeah. So it's like, well, I guess I'd better just shoot as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, shooting as much as possible is certainly something that I'm down with.
For Warp Coven, just hit him with the mono Dire Avengers.
Luckily we have the sample size from Worlds last year where someone did play Dire Avengers the entire tournament, and he did not do particularly poorly, but he didn't do very well. So perhaps mixing in a couple more of the aspects is probably the way to go most of the time.
So people occasionally ask me about Dire Avengers and like, oh, have you ever played all Dire Avengers? And honestly, no. Part of that, though, was that last edition, in tournaments, you had a roster. So you have this 20-man roster of models that you bring with you, and then you build your team composition from that. And the way that I ended up playing it was like, okay, I want to have access to all Howling Banshees. I want to have access to all Striking Scorpions. I want to have access to a couple different Exarch weapon options. So I only had room for 2 Dire Avenger warriors. And because a lot of my Dire Avengers were all on 25 mil bases, I didn't rebase them. I rebased the 2 that I was using for Kill Team. And so it wasn't until fairly recently that it's like, okay, I'll actually rebase everybody. I'll do all the right things. And that I finally like fully painted up Dire Avengers to play them for Kill Team. So I've been running them more. I've been running more than just the 2. running the Exarch quite a bit, actually. I really like it. But yeah, initially I just didn't have that as an option because I hadn't built them last edition and couldn't be bothered.
Yeah, I really like the Dire Avenger Exarch, and one of the locals in my group here, Jamie, has played a few games of all Dire Avengers as well, and he's kind of been like, he's had some pretty crazy games, like especially slapping elites around with just like run around and hammer people with a bunch of lethal 5 ceaseless Dire Avengers, and we did a little test game where I think I killed like one Dire Avenger and he like tabled me because he just like rolled hot and then ran across the board and was just like murdering everyone, and I was like, that was outrageous.
Yeah,
But like we
I'll
said,
give it a
rolling
go.
hot is what you expect from them, especially when you like throw lethal 5 in the mix.
Yeah, how to be good at Blades of Khaine? Just roll more crits, right? Yeah, so I've been playing around.
Annual crit.
Yeah, well, not one. We always get at least 2, so you know.
Yeah, well, and you roll crits, I suppose, in this situation.
You roll 3 crits.
I've been playing around with the Dire Avenger Exarch with the what's it called? The Shimmer Shield a bit, which I mostly as a joke. But it is really funny into certain teams being able to take a portable barricade and a Dire Avenger Exarch with a Shimmer Shield and be like, all right, I've got a 2-up save and I ignore piercing, and I'm going to just walk 5 inches up the board at you each turn. Can you do anything about it? Because some teams kind of can't.
I mean, Dire Avengers did get, the upgrade in, I think, 2 patches ago, where they got balance as long as they're shooting someone that's on an objective or they're on an objective. So compared to where they were at Worlds, they definitely did get a big glow up. So I can make some reasonable sense on, 8 Dire Avengers zooming around on Volcus and on In the Dark, just because you have access to balance starting. Generally, you get ceaseless, so you're generally basically able to re-roll your entire pool of 4 dice. It's not that crazy. And then off of the back of being able to re-roll your entire dice pool, you also have on-demand lethal 5. So you are almost always going to land the 2 crits when you need to against single targets, and maybe sometimes you get a little bit more out of it.
Yeah, and now that I don't have a roster and bring 30 models with me to tournaments, yeah, absolutely. Although I think that in terms of just sort of a metagame read, there's enough teams that have melee pressure that you need to deal with that I think it's going to be few and far between with games where you'd want to play that. If you're thinking about getting into Blades of Khaine and dreaming of just going all Dire Avengers into everything, maybe slow your roll a little bit, pick up some Scorpions and some Banshees. You are going to want all the options. Running just one of the 3 aspects all the time is going to get old fairly fast and will leave you unable to answer certain things.
Especially the boring skew. 4 dice on 3s, 2-4 is not going to make you win any real big situations in melee. Space Marines are good because at 3-4 generally they'll put in enough chip damage where they can at least injure someone. Those Dire Avenger Warriors are not really going to be able to even do that.
Those fists will not get it done.
That's
you get charged by a Goremonger and hit them back for 1 damage. It's
give them a little
rough.
tickle. That's why you bring the 1 power sword on your Dire Avenger Exarchs. You still have all the Dire Avengers. You can double all your aspect techniques. You still have a power sword. And also I want to say that ability where it's basically the same thing as the Wraithbone Talisman is the aspect technique, but for armor, for Dire Avengers only. It's basically if you roll 2 fails, you discard 1 and you upgrade another one. Odds are you're going to get 1 save out of 3 dice extremely often, and then you discard the other, and then that's 2 armor saves. And it actually ends up being 2 armor saves more reliably than power armor.
Pretty good.
Plus, the Dire Avenger Exarch with a Shimmer Shield and a Dire Sword is just basically a Banshee by any other name, as long as he has a crack grenade to be able to throw something at someone.
Well, I think you can, if you don't need the Shimmer Shield, if you're going into something without a bunch of piercing, you can just take a pistol.
Yeah.
So
it would just be very funny to this Dire Avenger Exarch, he is my melee piece with a crack grenade.
Oh, it is hilarious to walk up with grenades behind a portable barricade and just slowly walk up chucking grenades at people. It's awesome.
At least
maybe not
that
amazing.
Slow. They move faster than everyone else with a shield.
Yeah, you're still going 5 inches. That's not terrible. And if you place it up so you can dash to it and then move up, you can get up the board where you need to be.
Yeah, I think the only problem is the Dire Avenger Exarch is an older model, so you might not actually be able to see over the barricade as he moves up. So he's going to have to put it to the side.
They got big old crests on the helmet. It's
That's still part of his
Actually, the
head.
Dire Avengers aren't that bad. They're like a little bit shorter, and they're not on tactical rocks like the Howling Banshees that are like jumping. Um, but they haven't been scale crept as bad as some things. And there's a lot of people out there that have been doing really good and honestly pretty easy conversions out of the new Guardian Defender kit.
That would make
So
sense.
you get
They're
the
almost
new scale
indistinguishable from the older
bodies.
kits.
Yeah, absolutely. Put a little, put the old helmets on them, and then like some grenades and some extra bits, and you're set. I know George Armour from the Toronto area was doing that. He's been posting up on some of the various discords with the pictures, and they look fantastic.
Yeah. If I
It
was
also
going
helps that he can
to,
really paint too.
yeah, he's an amazing painter. If I was going to run Blades of Khaine, I think I would start a fresh one and make it Drukhari based. So I'd have like Incubi, Witches, and Cabalite Warriors, throw them all on 28s.
That'd be cool.
Especially because they all come in boxes of 10. So it makes it so you have to buy slightly fewer boxes. A lot of it is older models, so they are a little bit cheaper, which is kind of neat. And then you've got a nifty little Drukhari theme.
Absolutely. Yeah, buying Blades of Khaine is obnoxious, especially because Aspect Warriors, they went from selling 10-man boxes to 5-man boxes and then don't charge all that much less.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's just hard to get hold of right now. There's been the recent Eldar refresh basically made all the Eldar popular again, and they've just been kind of out of stock for a while.
But honestly, you can usually find stuff on eBay if you really need to. There's also people, I don't know if y'all care about this. Some play groups are fine with a lot of 3D printing. We've got a lot of folks locally that print, and there's some people that have done really cool 3D printable sculpts. One of them I actually ran into at the Montreal GT. I think it's Havoc Minis, Edge Minis. I'd have to double check. But he's done a bunch of really cool sculpts. The Tech Elves sculpts are all his. And we ran into him. He was playing his Kroot that he also sculpted and printed out. So yeah, we were talking to him, and he's like, "Oh yeah, like these are actually my sculpts." And then somebody else that went up with us to the tournament from Burlington was like, "Oh, I bought all of your Eldar sculpts." Just there's people that have done some really cool stuff. So
yeah,
that's also an option if you're interested in it.
So part of the reason why we wanted to bring you on, not just the Blades of Khaine, sophistry, was because you're also running tournaments in your local area, and you mentioned how in the Vermont area there's not a ton of kill team going on. You're traveling out to Boston, you're traveling up to Montreal. Theoretically, maybe you'll come down to the New York Open later this year, October 18, 19, tickets on sale now. But tell us a little bit about your local scene, what makes it special, why people who are in the area should come up.
Yeah, so, a couple years ago, like a lot of places, there wasn't really anyone playing Kill Team here. I remember I was going over to our local game store, and there was this one guy, Brett, who kept trying to teach people Kill Team. And honestly, the first time that I played Kill Team was with Brett, and I felt bad because he'd been trying to get people to demo the game all day, and no one had taken him up on it. So I, had my 40K stuff with me because that's what I was there to play. Pulled out a bunch of Eldar, did the Index Craft World Kill Team, and had a great time. And so for the longest time, it was me and Brett and Will just like trying to get people into it. It eventually started to get some traction, and now we're up to the point where we regularly run 3-round events at our local store, and we also have like Wednesday nights as kind of our Kill Team night. We regularly have between 8 and 14 people there. So we have really good turnouts. And Burlington is not a big city. There just isn't a lot of population density, and there aren't a lot of other cities really close by. So, for where we live, that's like really fantastic. We've had really good numbers. And part of that is because we've been really focused on trying to build a community and not just like come out and play cutthroat, competitive games, and that's all we do, and like crush the new people. We've really tried to make it welcoming and to grow our numbers. And so, going up to Montreal, they have a really similar community mindset, which has been fantastic. Montreal's only an hour and 45 minutes from us, so it's not all that far. So, we've been going up there to play in some stuff. The rest of New England is further. So there's a lot of tournaments in Maine, or they've been running some stuff in Boston. And like I said earlier, that's about 4 hours for us. Now, we'll do 4 hours each way for a 3-round event occasionally, but that's a long day. That's a lot. So it's been a little bit harder to get as many folks up to us from out of the area, just because it is a long drive and other people aren't as insane as we are. And that's fine. But to that end, we've been working on a couple different things. So a lot of the initial work for this was from Will, who I've had on our YouTube channel a couple times. He basically put together a tournament series trying to get games going on at some smaller cons and at some other gaming stores in our region. So in Montreal, in New Hampshire, across the lake in upstate New York, and here in Burlington. So it's an 8-tournament series, and I know everyone won't be able to see this, but he got like a small wrestling belt for the points leader, and then there's going to be a larger belt that goes to whoever wins. So I'm currently the points leader. This is the
smaller belt slot into the larger belt.
No, I think it just is what it is, and this is going to go to I think it's like a full size one that's going to go to whoever wins. So Will's been doing a lot of work trying to not just run events here in Burlington, but to get other people in our region on board and to grow kill teams so that we can, spread the good word. It's a lot of fun. Like, it's really a great game, and I think it's a great competitive game too. So there's a lot of people out there that want to play like a tight competitive game, and that isn't always 40K. So we're trying to convert them, get them on board. And that's been starting to pick up a bit, which is great. We also wanted to try and run a GT here in Burlington and to try and use that as an excuse to get more people out to visit us, right? Like, it's easier to travel for a 2-day thing than it is for, driving a bunch of hours each way in one day, because that's something only crazy people do. So we're running our first GT later this summer. It is up on BCP. It is June 28th and 29th. It is called Scrap for the Strap because it's part of the tournament series that we're doing. And we have 18 people signed up so far, which is very exciting. We're on for 5 rounds, 3 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday. And one of the nice things about our local game store is it's huge. So we don't need to spring for a venue to host a GT. We can host it in the same place we play on Wednesday nights. We've got room for, honestly, if we pushed it, we could probably do 50 or 60 people in our space. And so one of the nice things about that is that we can then charge less for a ticket because we don't have a venue, and we can put more of that money back into prize support. So we try to go pretty heavy on prize support for all of our events. One of our guys has been doing a lot of 3D printing, so he's been making cases and a bunch of other game aids and stuff for prize support. We're really trying to entice people to come up and play with us. Also, June in Burlington, Vermont is lovely. Like, this is a place that people come for vacation. Back when they were, railroad barons and whatnot, like the Vanderbilts built their summer estate up here because it's really nice. So after the GT on Saturday night, like, we're going to go get dinner, get some drinks, and then I'm going to go swim in the lake. It's going to be great.
Sounds amazing.
So yeah, we've got one crazy guy that he said that he's convinced his wife that they should take a vacation to Burlington for a long weekend. And so he's apparently talked her into that, and so he's going to come and play in the GT with us. And if you can pull off that Jedi mind trick, which, that's impressive. But if you can pull that off, it is a lovely place to vacation.
All right, fair enough. Milton, I just want to say thanks for coming on, talking about Blades of Khaine in depth, showing off. We'll have links to the YouTube channel that you've been talking about your in-depth Blades of Khaine strategies, and also links to this upcoming June 28-29 tournament in Vermont. It sounds lovely.
Thank you very much. It really is a pleasure to get on here and get a chance to talk with y'all.
Yeah, absolutely. And as always, thank you, listeners, for listening until the end.